President Trump is spending the holiday weekend at Mar-a-Lago and on the golf course, and sending a barrage of missives on social media, affecting politics at home and abroad. Beginning yesterday morning, when he declared the airspace above Venezuela, quote, closed in its entirety, amid what he says is a campaign aimed at disrupting drug cartels, prompting Venezuela to accuse Trump of an, quote, illegal and unjustified aggression against their country. Meanwhile, at home, he's taking his anti-immigration agenda to a whole new level in the wake of the shooting of 2 National Guard members in Washington, with a suspect an Afghan national. Trump now threatening a host of new measures, halting all asylum decisions, saying he would pause migration from, quote, third world countries, while warning that green card holders from certain countries would have their papers reviewed. And his rhetoric has gotten even coarser. There's a lot to unpack this morning, and I have an excellent panel to break this all down with. Tia Mitchell with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, CNN's Stephen Collinson, and USA Today's Susan Page. Good morning.
Good morning.
Happy Thanksgiving belatedly. Nice to see you all here. I want to start with what's happening with Venezuela, because I think that a lot of Americans don't realize what's happening down there. We're seeing the biggest military buildup down there in the Caribbean in decades. And it's not entirely clear what the next steps are going to be. There's been more than 80 people killed in these more than 20 boat strikes that have occurred. The administration says it is about disrupting these cartels, but the buildup is much broader than suggesting a simple effort to try to get rid of cartels. What is this? Is this an effort to try to topple the Maduro government there? Is this a possible war that they're preparing for? Or is it saber rattling?
I think one of the reasons why we don't know the answers to that is because the administration hasn't really explained it very well. To your point, it does look like a PSYOPs operation to try and topple Maduro, the president of Venezuela, or to get the generals around him to do it for the United States. The administration's argument that this is all about drugs trafficking is somewhat curious, because if that was the aim, there might be other places in Latin America where you would start it. The polls, for example, show massive, overwhelming opposition among Americans to a war in Venezuela. A lot of people think it would be incompatible with the president's, foundational belief of no more foreign wars. But this is a very MAGA thing, I think. There's clearly an attempt by the administration to project American power through the Western Hemisphere. That's not new historically, but they're backing all of these populist right-wing leaders through Brazil, Argentina. The president intervened in the election today in Honduras, saying he was going to pardon the former president of Honduras, who was found guilty in the US of drugs trafficking. So that undercuts one of the big rationales. So it's very unclear, I think, exactly what the strategic goal is of the administration.
And speaking of the polls, as you mentioned, it just a CBS News poll just out recently about whether Americans would favor military action in Venezuela. Just 30%. 70% would oppose. I mean, to Stephen's point, typically when you see a military campaign, there is a build-up, there's a messaging strategy. We saw this with George W. Bush in the Iraq War. There's really been none of that with the Trump administration right now.
In fact, an even higher percentage in that poll said the president needs to explain what's going on there. 3/4 of Americans said that. 2/3 of Republicans said they needed to hear more explanation from Trump before moving ahead. So clearly this would be, I think, politically here, a risky maneuver, and one hard to square with the pardon he's promised now to a Honduran president who has undergone due process and been convicted, as opposed to the 80+ people who've been killed at sea, who have not gone through due process before being killed by American forces.
And there are these questions that are building on the Hill, too, about the campaign that's going on there. Yesterday, we saw the leaders of the House and Senate Armed Services Committee come out and demand answers about a military strike that occurred, a boat strike that occurred in early September, in which Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, apparently ordered everyone who was on that vessel to be killed. There's some concern about the way that it was conducted that could have violated the rules of armed conflict.
Yeah.
It just shows you you don't really see this kind of bipartisan calls for information, investigation, when it's Republicans leading these committees, asking the Trump administration for details.
It's bipartisan. It's both the House and the Senate. And I think, we don't have a lot of information even about the 80 people who were killed. But the little bit that has been reported as media has been digging is that they were relatively low level on, the hierarchy of drug trafficking. They were probably just regular people who were hired to do the transporting, not necessarily the masterminds behind the operation. So again, the question is, if you're just killing the mules, so to speak, does that really affect the operation? Because at the end of the day, probably the cartels saw them as dispensable as well. So I just think there is so much problematic about these killings, about the buildup, about what the plan is for Venezuela. And I think most Americans, Trump, as we've talked about, his whole campaign was centered around ending foreign wars, focusing on domestic issues. But even beyond that, I think a lot of people in America are just like, why Venezuela? Why now? Why in this way? It just doesn't, there's just not enough evidence or information.
And I want to get back to what you referenced earlier here, Stephen, about this pardon that Trump gave to the former Honduran president, Juan Orlando Hernandez, because what the Trump administration is saying is that this Venezuela campaign is about to disrupt these drug cartels. They say they campaigned on it. This is what this is about. Well, Hernandez was given an $8 million fine by a U.S. judge just last year and sentenced for 45 years in prison for his role in drug trafficking. This is how the New York Times put it. So the two posts displayed a remarkable dissonance in the president's strategy as he moved to escalate a military campaign against drug trafficking while ordering the release of a man prosecutors said had taken, quote, cocaine-fueled bribes from cartels. It goes on to say prosecutors said that Mr. Hernandez for years allowed bricks of cocaine from Venezuela to flow through Honduras en route to the United States. Trump said in his pardon about why he did it, he said in Truth Social, he said, many people said that he was treated very harshly and unfairly.
Yeah, and that seems to be the rationale that he was a former president who was forced to face justice. We've seen this before, in fact, in Brazil, with the president looking after his political allies. Clearly, it's completely incompatible with the idea of a drugs war. But at the same time, I think this is a president and an administration that's increasingly seeking to use its power for its own purposes while it can, and perhaps isn't as much worried about polls and the Constitution and power as perhaps it should be, given the fact that a lot of Republicans are worried about how this all plays out in the midterms.
The fact that the Republican chairs of the House and Senate Armed Services Committee are willing to announce that they're going to investigate this, demand some answers from the Trump administration, strikes me as one sign of the erosion we're beginning to see with President Trump standing even with his own party. We've been waiting for years for this to happen. It's been predicted again and again. But his approval rating is down to a record second-term low. And Republicans are increasingly nervous about what's going to happen in the midterms to them in next year's election.
In the meantime, he's announced all these immigration efforts as well. While this is all happening in Mar-a-Lago, the shooting of these National Guard members happened in Mar-a-Lago. One of them, sadly, was killed, another one fighting for his life. Trump then going on social media saying he would go all out on a whole wide range of actions. While he was in Mar-a-Lago, of course, he was playing golf. He posted this on social media, playing golf with the live golfer Brooks Koepka, the former NHL great Wayne Gretzky, the Fox News host Brett Baer. That happened yesterday. Trump posted a chip shot that he made also as well, pinned that to the top of his Truth Social account. But he was also announcing pretty aggressive immigration actions, among them halting all asylum decisions, pausing the visa issuance for travelers with Afghan passports, saying that he would permanently pause migration from all third world countries, and it goes on. The question is, how much can he actually do, and whether the American public likes it? 62% of American adults disapprove. 69% of independents disapprove of his handling of immigration. This used to be his strength.
Yeah, and the perception was that Trump was initially, when he came back to the White House, he said, I'm doing what I was elected to do, which is crack down on immigration. So this polling indicates that people think he's gone too far, because it's not like he hasn't done what he campaigned on, but he did it in a way that I think some Americans perceive as extreme. And now he's announcing more policies that in many ways are not only extreme, but again, it's the lack of focus. What are we trying to accomplish here? Because if this is about the very tragic killing of the National Guardsmen, then we need to know more about the motives behind that killing to make sure that nothing like this happens again. By all accounts, this individual accused of killing the National Guardsman was vetted, was a legal immigrant, legal. So some of the things that the president is announcing don't seem to really be about anything other than more extreme in immigration rules.
I often go back to thinking of how they explained it, kind of just like the way the Venezuela campaign. They said they were going to do the largest deportation force in history. Trump campaigned on that, sure. But then when they were asked after they won, well, what does that look like? They didn't quite explain it. They said that we get rid of the most violent criminals, and but it's like, okay, then what? And we've seen this go much further.